The following audio is via a Skype call.
Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Get ready to find your free will from your roots in the stars.
Welcome, Talk Cosmos. This is Pisces again on March 2nd, 2019, and the title is Musicsphere Vibrations. You know, the musical notes vibrate their frequency, and it's without boundaries, because music really connects us to our unlimited soul, the very essence of just about every dimension. You could say that the energies of the collected Pisces and the abstraction of music share a common feature because of no boundaries. The music potentially, it rings through endless wave vibrations. That physical connection into our spiritual essence that we experience, it touches right down deep. Although I will say that musicality, the tonalities and the scales vary because what is tension and release shift. But regardless, people feel harmony because of it. It is that oneness, very similar to Pisces, and that's how our whole talk will orient. Tonight, Paetra Tauchert from California, Sebastopol, California, and has spoken with us twice before, once for Taurus, if you're looking at the archives, and once for Virgo. And Paetra is a certified evolutionary astrologer through Maurice Fernandez's complete course. She has a blog called Heirloom Magic and a newsletter that she writes, does consultation readings, and it creates a most fascinating astro book. And Paetra has started her own radio show called Astroscape. It's musical. That's a great reason to have her on tonight. And it gives a personal perspective through the astrology lens, and that happens to be on the station KOWS FM. However, just check Talk Cosmos. I keep Paetra along with other hosts, or guests rather, on the station, so you can just look that up if you can't remember KOWS FM. And Paetra's a master gardener, artist, and class instructor. So I'm very happy. Hello, Paetra.
Hi, Sue. It's great to be back.
It is. You know, music is such a spectrum of, as I was saying, of tension and release. I played music for many years, and I went back to school and got some certificate degrees in them. So I have this love affair with music, and I'm just fascinated too by your program. With that said, there's so many factors that I'm thinking about, but really, because the world I'll think of the question. The question that I want to ask you right off the bat is, with your program that you've had for a good 6 months now, I'm sure, probably a little longer, and you feature musicians who've been born during the archetype, and then you show their music. What kind of links are you discovering through this kind of research that you're doing with the musical prowess of this individual and the music that they're actually creating?
Well, my method is that I'm simultaneously, my intention for my show, there's two reasons. One is to educate people about astrology, something that I really love, and I find it to be such an incredibly useful language that I'm always happy that if more people can speak astrology, that's great. So that's part of the purpose. And even if your goal isn't to speak astrology, I do the astro weathers to just kind of help people get a heads up of what's going on. But then beyond that, it's okay, for example, I do 2 shows a month, so I just did the Pisces show. So at this point, I've been doing the show for a little while, so now I'm just constantly, whenever I listen to music anywhere, I always have an ear to like, who is this? When's their birthday? And it would be fun to be able to do like a full analysis of each chart, but really I'm sticking more to the sun and the moon or some other prominent things that really jump out in terms of the signature.
Yes.
But and then, like the reason that it's fun to play with astrology and famous people is because they are larger than life. That's what makes them famous. They've like impacted the collective in a way. And so when you look at them and you look at and musicians are more, I feel like they're more personal. Like you see more of their essence than you do of like an actor or an actress, because they're really putting their soul out there. So when you aggregate, or when I aggregate a collection of musicians that all, for example, have the strong Pisces signature, and then the experience of listening to the playlist, it's like, it's classic Pisces. I mean, I'm doing it with all of the signs, but Pisces is the sign where you can just kind of cruise right past any boundaries and just be like, oh, I'm totally understanding this on this like deep, emotional, psychic, physical level all of a sudden, because I'm able to be immersed in the tones that these artists chose to generate, some of which are like obviously impacted the collective in a huge way because they're very beloved songs and very beloved artists. That's my long-winded answer.
No, it's beautiful. It's well put, because it is true that we need that poetry. In fact, I was just looking, it's the same idea, as beginning to notice everywhere, like you were saying with the musicians. I do that with the newspaper, and I clip out all these articles. And I'm just so thrilled when they relate to the talk that we're doing. And this one is...
It's very exciting.
Yeah, exactly. Because really, it is that essence that astrology is this huge arena of helping us discern life as above, as below, and through the development and the cycles. I mean, we know this, so that teaching it, like we're both interested in doing, is really a great, vehicle. So I agree. This one says, when society chooses to ignore poetry, and the reason I just thought as a thought here, bringing it up, because music is so often poetry. And
it is. It's totally poetry.
And it blends that sense of the chaos, which Pisces, in a sense, because it's of the wild, it's the last sign, and Neptune, the whole archetype, embraces the whole nature of life, and versus Virgo on the other spectrum that's trying to make order out of chaos. So here, poetry, in a sense, there was some criticism here that people aren't always so in tune with poetry, but then what is poetry? But in songs, people hear it all the time, and
it's a great vehicle for poetry. Yeah, music.
And it was saying too, it's like the precursor of thoughts, of getting like music down deep into us, getting little seeds of ideas into us that
well, and it's like, even if poetry isn't officially music, if somebody is paying attention to, for example, they're writing an iambic pentameter or something along those lines, where there is a rhythm and a meter and essentially a beat, so to speak, that you're already generating a type of music, even if, even it doesn't get taken to the next level.
Yes, and that beat, that reminds me of our heartbeat. It's just so fundamental. And of course, everything has a cycle, even though we may not, well, of course, we do understand the tides, with the sun and the moon, but rhythm, it's just, it correlates to every part of us. And it brings in the spirit and the matter, the body, which, as we know, can get so separated.
Right. It's actually, kind of an unconscious healing agent that is working all the time. Like listening to music is something that is, like you say, reuniting the body with the spirit, which I feel like that schism is one of the great malaises of the modern age.
Absolutely. Yes. Healing agent, it's true. In fact, prior to coming here, I was thinking about the magical, not the magical mean, but the golden mean, of art.
I would make the argument that it's magical.
Thank you. That must have been inspired by you. Yes, you do. So right, and the Fibonacci cycle, which is this where you take 1 and you add it into 1 and 1 and it's 2, and then 2 and 1 is 3, and then it goes on in this sequence, 3, 5, 8 of this amazing sequence. Well, this article was saying that the Fibonacci, the golden mean, the Fibonacci sequence.
Spiral. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the spiral, that it relates to some people's music. It made me realize that tension release factor that builds up is at that point. He had some mathematical, this is on it's on, let's see, who was it? It was, for our audience sake, it's Dubs Pot, and the author was Rory, Rory PQ, on June 1st, 2016. But what he figured was there was a song that he, by disclosures, some of these I'm not really familiar with. I don't know. Are you familiar with the group Disclosures?
No, I don't know that book.
No. So at any rate, but the point being is that he mathematically figured out in the whole measures, it was 129 measures, so if he multiplied that times the mean, then it was this particular measure, and yes, that's where the bridge happened. And yes, and so over and over again, and I was thinking about that with art and with the whole balance of the golden mean, which is sort of 2/3, not quite, and how the tipping point, of that, where there's harmony or some kind of tension that builds into harmony, because music needs that tension.
I have to interject with a quote from Goethe that resonates with this, which is that architecture is frozen music.
Ooh.
And so that Fibonacci, structure is along those same lines. It's like that's a incarnated visual metric of something that also could be, like you're saying, on another level with music and the bridge and all of that. That's really fascinating.
Absolutely. And I wrote down that quote, frozen music, but again, who is that a quote by?
Wolfgang von Goethe.
Oh, Goethe. Goethe, yeah. Wolfgang.
Yeah, I didn't quite get the German throat
Oh, that's
thing.
right.
But yeah.
I took German a long time
Good job,
ago.
you did.
Very good.
Also known as Goethe if you're going on that road in San Francisco.
Oh, really? I was born there. I better go back and check it out. Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating, this whole... Oh, and another article, we'll pull it together here, but we are pulling it together. And this is about how in Seattle, the Seattle Symphony, we have a new conductor. It's always exciting to see how they bring in these new ideas. But this is... they built a score. When I say they, the homeless youth and Seattle Symphony Orchestra built a score together. And it's a whole, this was as of May 19th, 2018, if anybody wants to look it up. But I thought, music speaks, as we were both saying, deep within. And people have amazing emotions that tell stories. And so what a gift to unite people like such a young, the youth in a common project like this. That has such great merit. I wish that could be expanded all over across the nation.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's going to be anything that would be continuing, but so often it's, again and again, they know that with older people, music is one of that last areas in the brain that still registers. People may not know their children, but they know the songs.
Right. Well, and I've read that also with people that suffer from strokes, they're able to kind of that's the one thing that will get them to be able to kind of move. If there's music that they really love, it helps them get into their bodies and kind of get back into the rhythm of what their body is supposed to do.
Yes. Just you bringing this up again, I'm so glad over and over again that we're talking about the mind-body, which is also spirit-body. And it's in so many parts of the archetypes, starting with Gemini of Castor and Pollux. But, it's this different relationship. By the time we get to Pisces, it's the whole shamas of the universe and the cohesive, whole, chaotic, wild, gorgeous part of life. And
The whole shebang.
yes, so uniting music, such a vehicle to really connect us, has great purpose, and we can participate. Go ahead. Yes.
Right. Well, just thinking that, like, even if people don't speak the same language at all, they still could play music together, that like universal language.
Exactly. Over and over again. In fact, wouldn't that be great? I've often thought to go play with a bunch of gypsies, take my violin and fiddle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to go to that show.
Yeah. But
wait, what instruments do you play? So I don't think I knew this about you.
well, I played violin, fiddle most of my life. And I say both because it's, really it's one instrument, but it's how you play it.
Right.
And
Nice.
then I picked up flute, which I really need to get that embouchure going again. And then I plunked away on piano, which I could never perform with, but I just love the piano. I could stay there for 12 hours. Yeah.
Me too. Big fan.
You play?
Of all of those, actually. Not really. I mean, my mom's a pretty amazing pianist, and I was raised with a piano in the house, and I can play Mary Had a Little Lamb with two hands and a few other parlor tricks, but I'm a connoisseur of music. I'm not really a musician.
Well, there's always the beautiful thing about music. It's like art. I think really just some basic lessons, and it's largely having either, well, I can say a good instructor, but even like with the piano, there's group pianos classes that give so much information because you don't have to read the bass clef. You can work off chords.
Right. It's true. I mean, and to be a musician, you don't have to necessarily be composing. I feel like that's kind of the yardstick I use for myself, where I'm like, I don't listen to music and imagine like I want to make this song, but I am able to, learn. Like I learned guitar, a few songs on the guitar,
There you go. But then,
I'm much more of a listening enthusiast.
Yeah. Well, standards, that's true. But on the other hand, I'm thinking about the music and the participation, the whole level, the whole integration of this gift. And that is that because with knowing some chords and the piano, I play a little ukulele, so I understand the string. I used to think, they'd be so simple. But, getting those fingers in the right patterns is a little tricky. And
oh my God, it's so hard.
Yeah, it is. And the thing about the piano is the keys are right there down in front of you. And so really by having some of those chords, doing that, you can progress. You could progress and learn to improvise. And in that case, compose. That's all I'm trying to say. And just with three chords, the blues.
Right. It's true.
But anyway, so we're plugging that along. Because right. Oh, now here's a different subject, but of course, and that is that is another article. Brandy Carlile, Carlili, that she began. Who's again? I'm not really familiar with her. I don't know if you are.
I don't know her name.
Yeah. But the point of this article was the fact that she began her own festival. Went down to Mexico and had a festival and brought in a lot of people.
Wow.
And it's that idea that in music that does, you think about folk music, it just unites a whole culture. And you think about rock or the blues or whatever genre of music, jazz, it unites groups of people or singers.
Yeah, it's true. It's rare to find a culture or a subculture of people that you can't like distill it down to a soul kind of musical root.
Yeah. Yeah. And interestingly, I think what came out of reading this article was that women, in their estimation, are still not quite as recognized as they would like. And so therefore they're thinking of creating these smaller venues that would give them that kind of attention. But along with that, I was just thinking how in some ways, music might be a precursor of the entire new age. I mean, we're talking about Pisces, but at this point, it's all in the kettle together. There's a little of all the signs in Pisces. And so, the fact that groups are getting to be more like-minded and finding their focus, such as festivals like in this particular one, they went down to Mexico, for a period of time. But I wondered how you were thinking, if you noticed that also, that this idea that even on a local basis, especially in the Bay Area, that maybe festivals are becoming more individualized, maybe?
I don't know. Honestly, I'm not much of a festival goer. I track them that they're happening, but the Bay Area traffic has gotten so thick that I'm unwilling to just like make that trip very often. I usually just wait, and when there's a band or a musician that I really love, then I seek them out and go see them.
Yeah. And I think that could be the emphasis of what of trying to do here, is that because we do have so many medias that it's able to share that information now, websites and et cetera. So,
well, one thing I think is interesting is that, this whole evolution of music in this modern, in our lifetimes, where it went from 8 tracks to vinyl to cassette tapes to CDs, and now most of the music is digital, and how much of the sound quality is compromised on MP3s and digital music. Like, you have so much more that you can effortlessly get, but compared to the experience of listening to like a vinyl record, where that immersion in all of the different, the highs and the lows, and that one of the things that all the digital music has made happen in the music industry is because the artists don't make that much money anymore because of all the downloads and stuff, that they're forced to tour again. So there's been kind of a renaissance of bands that you maybe never thought you would have a chance to see. You can go out and see them again.
I like this. I mean, I like your comments. I mean, they respond very well, because when I was leaving school, I remember very well that I went back in 1993, and of course the 80s had eclipsed the 6-night-a-week gig business with the synthesizer, and by the 90s, it was really a trauma of how musicians were going to get their royalties, because of downloading and all the shifts and stuff. And so, at that time I was thinking, or I was reading, I can't remember which, but the fact is that a lot of music happened from grassroots, like at taverns, or just people jamming and getting together and just playing music. And so with you bringing this up, that people are forced to go out, and I don't know about forced, but that's where the
forced in a good
is.
way, like that Saturnian forcing, where you're like, darn it, and then on the other side you're like, this is really great, actually, thank you.
Yeah, I personally have always thought that's how musicians could reach their audience, was by traveling, because I was aware of various groups at the time, but they always stayed homebound, and partly because they were fed here, there were gigs, but
right.
Really, and when you think about it with Pisces, that's the commonality, the wide collective. That's the word I'm looking at. That really, and sort of reach out and find your audience or meet your audience, and it really does work with that Piscean energy.
Agreed.
Yeah, well, that is exciting. It's sad too. Thinking I took a note to find about the lost sound quality, because I don't live in
I had it explained to me by somebody whose parents both worked for a record company in Spain, in Madrid, for many years, that a record is like a sound sculpture and nothing else compares to it.
Yes, the grooves.
And that at each stage there was a huge truncation of the quality of sound, down to where we are now.
Well, when you think about just the vinyl itself, those little grooves and how it would work. So
Right, imagine how huge they are on a microscopic level. They're like mountains.
hey, wouldn't that, that just inspired me. I could see a whole movie, traveling your music and you fall into the grooves on the big disc and you're out
Totally. Pixar, here's your next big idea.
there. Yeah. No. Can we get over? Oh, there's a little dip. Let's see what happened. Oh, there was a
Right.
sound break. Ah,
It actually kind of reminds me of, do you know the original Fantasia? The one from way
yes.
back when? And that whole, I mean, it was such an opus in its time, and it was created at the peak of hand-drawn illustration, the golden age of
Yes.
hand-drawn illustration, and the peak. And he was kind of like Martha Stewart in that, she's talented, but she's really talented at bringing really talented people together and producing them. So that's what he did with Fantasia. He brought together the best artists of the time and was like, here you go. Here's the like finest classical music, like knock yourselves out. And so there's that early part with the synesthesia, I think I'm pronouncing that right, where, like the classic thing with psychedelics, where you can taste colors and see sounds and all of that. So just thinking about how very Piscean that movie actually is, I'd be tempted to take a peek at Walt Disney's chart and see what he has going on in the Pisces-Neptune department.
Oh, that's exciting, Paetra. We're going to take a brief announcement, and we'll come back with Paetra Tauchert and myself, Sue Rose Minahan, on Talk Cosmos, talking about the vibrations, Pisces, and music. While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We are currently in the yin period of Pisces, ruled modernly by Neptune and by Jupiter in traditional astrology of the ancients. By leaving a cycle based on the equality of all humans and brilliancy, Pisces concludes the 12 signs that energetically encompass the entirety of the universe, where humans have no control. As a mutable water sign represented by two fish swimming in opposite directions of the forces of life, we experience in Pisces the collective unconscious energy of the unknown. Intuitive, psychic Pisces completes the seed cycle, initiated with Aries' willful separation from the Piscean womb.
Celebrate your star energy blessings. Schedule a natal astrology chart consultation with Talk Cosmos host Sue Rose Minahan. You'll learn to better understand what personally fuels your soul's seed direction. Sue focuses on your questions to connect you into your unique heart's desire and your true soul path's birth essence, including a recording and a copy of your chart. Schedule by emailing info@talkcosmos.com. That's info@talkcosmos.com.
Hi, this is Eileen Grimes of the Jupiter Rising Show, and you're listening to Talk Cosmos on Alternative Talk 1150 AM, where we discuss the meaningfulness of our roots in the stars.
Alternative Talk 1150. It's good for what ails you. This statement has not been evaluated by the FDA.
Hi, Paetra. We're back again. This is Talk Cosmos. And Paetra, just to remind people, also has her show on KOWS-FM. So you can check that out and just go to Talk Cosmos and all that's listed and our archives too. Paetra, when we just broke away, you brought up Fantasia. Boy, do I remember that. That's definitely in my experience. But that brings up the whole subject of movies and not just movies, of course, there's television, but the movies in particular that really use music just to express.
No, it's true. You're so cued by the music that if you are immersed in the movie viewing experience, you don't realize it. But, here's the scene, and it may not look alarming, but suddenly the hair on the back of your neck is standing up because the music is telling you that you should be alarmed, and it's working,
Yeah, it is. It's that dissonance, the tension, like the augmented force, just going, not quite.
I mean, it's almost like the sense of smell where it bypasses the hypothalamus, I believe it is, and, triggers those deep memories. Like, it's not quite the same, but music kind of has that same thing where it just goes in, like, I mean, it's basically what we're talking about with Pisces. Like, there's not a lot of defense that you can do with music short of turning it off.
I love these words that you're bringing up. No defense, which really shows the boundary, no boundaries of both Pisces and music, the vibrations. We haven't really talked about that, but then also to bring it up with smell, which is so excellent because that's the body factor. And you're right, it triggers a lot. It is involuntary, in a sense, perhaps.
Also, I do want to mention, I did pull up Walt Disney's chart, and he has Neptune at the very top of his chart in his 10th house of career. So very prominently placed, and it's making a strong aspect to his moon and to his Mars and to his Venus. So definitely a very Neptunian,
Yay!
The modern ruler of Pisces person.
Oh, and to think of all that graphics, he really blended everything. Yeah, like you were saying.
Yeah,
that's very super.
Well, and actually, he's got Venus at 1 degree Aquarius, and right now we've got the moon and Venus conjunct at 1 and 2 degrees Aquarius. So I guess that's partly why I was sensing Walt. Hi, Walt.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, that's right on my Jupiter. That's, the vibrations of music with those, if you pluck a string and it vibrates at a certain frequency, like 440 or whatever, and then it diminishes by half, but it keeps that same tonality. We may not hear it, but given the right environment, it would just continue resonating onward and be heard.
Well, and I'm sure you've seen those videos of sound vibrations and then like sand or some sort of, granular material is put on a surface, and then it makes these different kind of snowflake spirograph patterns based on the tone.
Yes. Yeah, that's ringing bells. In fact, I'm thinking of all the unique shapes along with water. If we have feelings and water does, just trying to relate all these if they do. But sound, just thinking about sound itself that you've brought up, it seems that I've heard, I don't know if it was Edgar Cayce that said that sound would be one of our healing modalities
in the modern era.
Yeah, for the future, whatever that meant, back whenever it was said. But yes, in the modern terms of progressed thinking of, I'm thinking of the A word, and then the moment I can't think of it, not adventurous, but alternative. Thank you. They're both, I guess alternative is adventurous, yes. But
it is true.
Yeah. Of healing. Yeah.
Well, even when you think about, both of those references to Dr. Emoto's work with the water, where he says, like, I love you to the water, and then freezes the ice crystal, and it's beautiful. And then he says, I hate you to the water, and freezes it, and it's a terrible looking thing.
Yeah.
And then also, like, the images in the sand, like, that's what's happening in our physical beings on some level from the music. It comes inside. That same vibration comes inside. And even though we can't quite see it in that same way, I think we can, at least on some level, assume that all of the water and matter in our bodies is responding in a similar way.
Like that frozen architecture that you brought up. I think this is excellent. I love how this is going. Because
maybe that's a leap, but Mercury's in Pisces about to station retrograde. I think if not now, when are we going to talk about this
Exactly.
stuff?
No, it's like poetry of thought. No, I think this is excellent. And because of that, there's a lot of responsibility for ourselves to consider. I know that what I'm saying as far as I don't know if accountability is the word, but I know that there's emotions that become habits, which just amazed me when I first read that years back. But and there's also, along with that thought, there's limited emotional responses that people, and I'm talking generally that segments of people, not all people by any means, but that can acknowledge, in other words, perhaps they're numbed, and so they can only feel terror or feel fear rather than the subtleties. And so this music can address that, through their sound. So I think it's really important if we could just become more conscious and try to consider the more peaceful or the more, and peaceful doesn't have to always be elevator stuff. It can be quite crescendoing and then healing. In other words, healing's a process, right?
It's true. Well, I mean, when you look at classical music, like there's incredibly powerful passages that then kind of resolve themselves into something. Like I'm thinking particularly of some Beethoven pieces.
Absolutely. And it was Stravinsky back in the early 1900s when he did Rites of Spring.
Yes.
From what I understand, people threw tomatoes at him. Now, first of all, I had to laugh and think, how do you get tomatoes at
Must have been a summertime concert.
Yeah, and people were maybe, instead of harking, have a beer, it was like, have a tomato, And so he got
softer landing than the beer bottles that maybe got thrown at Bob Dylan when he went electric at the Newport concert.
Oh my. Yeah. So, but it was so, to those ears, it was so dissonant. The sounds were so harsh that people couldn't resonate with them. Whereas other cultures too can sound like that, just chaotic. But it differs with our whole makeup, what sounds like music, or not.
Well, also just a way to show that he was like ahead of the curve, on the right track, because that's the time-honored path of the heretic who can see into the future, and we can never underestimate the power of the status quo to resist something new and good, but that just is different.
Come to think of it, the Beatles, which I grew up, they kept, at that time, most musicians would have a genre and they would stick to it, but not the Beatles. And the Beatles were just unbelievably powerful as an energy. And all of a sudden they would just discard their entire past and go launching into this brand new area. And it was like, well, okay, do I hate the Beatles or do I just say I love them and I'll go with them? So, yeah, when
George Harrison is the Pisces Beatle, he's always my favorite.
He, I think, throughout time has become really a favored person. I don't think I had that wisdom when I was young, but I've gained great appreciation of him in so many ways. Yeah, I would agree with you.
Well, and he's the one that diverged off and did all of that devotional kind of Hare Krishna music.
Very wise person. I mean, he great wisdom and soul wisdom too. Had a lot to offer.
Yeah.
And going back to musicians, it's interesting, with, like you're saying, it's very true. Musicians really don't need to speak the same language or even come from the same neighborhood or country or anything in order to sit down and play music. And on the same token, I know for jazz musicians, really you know a person more by what they play. Oh, you mean the sax player? Oh, you mean the drummer? Oh, well, they were, blah, blah, blah. So it extends that realm.
Right, that becomes the identity. It's like, it doesn't matter if he's like an African or an American or an Italian. It's like, no, he's a sax player.
Yeah. Unless they're forgiving, maybe they do this or do that with their private life, but then they say, okay, that's.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I feel like musicians are cut more slack than many famous people. Like it was said once to me by somebody that the musicians are kind of like the sacrificial lambs of our culture. Not always, but as I do my radio show and it's like, okay, this amazing person and they died of this and they had a major drug addiction and the next one also had a heroin addiction and then they died. It's like, I know that other people have drug addictions and they also die, but it's hard to not notice how many musicians end up having major drug problems for at least part of their life and also maybe have their lives end because of it. And it's like, it's that same kind of outside of the bounds of normal society that artists and musicians are kind of allowed to go to the fringes where other people are interested in, but they're kind of like, oh, that's scary. I'd rather watch you do it, you know? So then the artists, the musicians are allowed to go big, and then their product is huge, and then possibly their life isn't that long, but it's kind of that concept of like they burned hot for a shorter period of time and then left this legacy.
Well, particularly with rock, and there are notable ones, whether it was, Michael Jackson and Prince that had, I remember, about pretty similar birth times. But this really brings it right back to Neptune. Like, and what's the, Neptune is such, which is in this whole course of this archetype as its ruling planet, but it is where you synthesizing this unknown, it is totally the unknown and the chaos and bringing it down. Not all people are really so grounded or want to be that grounded. And I think that's where the susceptibility is in, like, just going with that total beyond freedom, just that total expansion. But the bottom line is they have to produce. I mean, nobody really wants to,
right,
or few people want to go and really hear someone do poorly at a gig. So regardless of what they might manage, there was a jazz musician I'd heard a story of, and such a Shaggy Dog story, a very well-known player. I think he was a sax player because the person telling me was a sax player, but he had very, very long fingernails, and I haven't researched to find out, and this would be back like in the 50s or something, but he was totally, unfortunately, involved with drugs to the point late in life where he just kept repeating the same song on stage, And so for a wide audience, this would not do,
Right. It depends on the level you've made it to. Like, I know in the latter years, Jerry Garcia would get a little mumbly with the lyrics, but he had, established himself forever as like a beloved musician. But yeah, that's not going to go very well in most instances.
Yeah, no, it is true. So,
but I just want to mention, in terms of all, like you brought up Prince and Michael Jackson, and they both have Pisces moons. Tom Petty has a Pisces moon. Joni Mitchell has a Pisces moon. I just have been swimming around in all these wonderful Pisces moons, so I just wanted to point that out.
Good point, too, because that emotional and both being water-oriented with the moon and that total wide arena of
well, and just that like tendency to play. Like, I feel like some of the best rock musicians, since that's what we're talking about, are the ones that can just get out of their own way and the expectations of the culture and just kind of show up as children and create something really pure. And that's what touches everybody, that whole concept of Pisces and Neptune, the modern ruler, being like, everybody. So if somebody's going to become famous and successful at something, it's because they've managed to touch enough of everybody that everybody agrees, like, yep, you're important and special. We're going to boost you up. You get to be one of those people.
Yeah, the collective thread, that area to be able to really dig down and find that core, that essence in order to share it. And the simplicity, which is really so Piscean, because it is that the wildness that isn't complex. I mean, we may have a diverse world, but yet there's still the simplicity of Pisces is such a strong, factor of it. And I guess I'm thinking too, like going back to, because obviously there's musicians of countless people, and Disney that you'd brought up had Neptune. So just to say that for the audience, which of course they would know, but does not need to have drugs just because in order to be a great musician. Although there certainly have.
Although the list is rather convincing. I mean, Walt Disney was known for his opium habit.
Oh, I didn't know that. See?
Oh yeah.
Amazing.
I mean, I don't know how well known he was at the time, but it's now known that he was into it.
Interesting.
And Lewis Carroll also, who doesn't have a strong Neptune signature, but is associated with Piscean kind of things because of Alice in Wonderland being such a Pisces tale.
Oh, yes, definitely. In fact, I was just looking at what she said. She says, I can't go back again because I'm not the same person. Oh, I think, did you post that? That was in your Instagram, I think. That's where I saw it. It was a
Yeah,
great
that was an
post.
Alice quote. Exactly.
Yeah,
There are so many great Mercury and Pisces quotes to be extracted from Lewis Carroll's works. It's just one after another.
yeah. Well, getting to the idea of people participation, it's like the idea of the youth that were with this particular symphony. But beyond that, there's music used to be part of every family back at the turn of the 19th century. And before that, people had pianos. They sang, they danced. People still dance, of course, but although I will say, going to high school reunions, which I don't do any longer, nobody dances. They listen to canned music. But it's very distressing. But it was part of the whole world, the function. And so I think this idea that there's so much to be shared through whether a person just picks up a little instrument, like a lot of ukulele groups these days, or goes to a choir, or whether they just somehow get involved with that extra part of this that lasts, as we were saying, into ancient age, you might say. And I mean, that's a bit of extreme thought, but when you're older,
Well, I think there's a lot to be said for, with Pisces in terms of both art and music. It doesn't really matter so much what the product is. It's just the act of trying to speak a different language, trying to just use a completely different approach to communication, even if you're not somebody who's well-versed and well-skilled, just somebody who sits down and like bangs out something on the drum, or like, here, take over the kazoo or the harmonica, or something that
tambourine
is less complicated.
The spoons.
But still, you're participating in something different. It's like you go into the right brain.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a combination. Like all of the rhythm stuff is somewhat left-brained, but the fluidity of how music can change and the beats can change, and I don't have the language exactly.
No, it's very true. No, it's beautiful because space is really music. You have to have a little distance, and it's that combination, everything. And I love how you say a different language. That's absolutely true, Paetra. It's so important. Like one time I used to play some folk music, and so I picked up the spoons. I was nothing great at the spoons, but it was sure fun. You just
exactly.
Yeah. Or like some of the musicians I'm thinking of the washboard, right? Zip, zip. Yeah, some of my favorite jug band music. I used to love that.
Yep.
And then again, it can be a language like call and response, which is the blues, which actually with the heritage here in our nation, of slavery, which is a tragic part of our history. But people would communicate through call and response, which is, I think, from Africa itself, but also indigenous to, if you use that word, indigenous to blues, which came out of the South here in this country of music. And so it has many facets, many ways to use that language. If
well, and the call and response makes me think of, I was just listening to the astrology podcast with Chris Brennan and Kelly Surtees and Austin Coppock, and they were talking about this Mercury and Pisces retrograde in terms of echolocation and sonar. And I feel like the sonar is the call and response and under the sea.
Ooh.
Like that is the language of the oceans. At least some of the critters down there.
Like the dolphins, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the deer dolphin. Up here we have the killer whale, or the orcas. And a big problem is the Navy doing their sonic testing under the ocean. And
oh my God, it's so evil.
It is, and there's no boundaries. I mean, certainly the fluid is a little less, but it's not like a barrier. It just keeps moving on. They're so sensitive. Which is
it's
interesting.
Like an evil use of Neptune.
Well, going back to this idea that frozen architecture, in other words, in the sense of form, of sound actually creating form, and using it in the sense of our bodies and of communication And, I'm thinking of animals with their great ears, how they, and of course the birds. I wish I could listen to I wish I knew what the birds were saying,
All sorts of things, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, every night and every morning they chip away, at the sunrise, and maybe they're just saying the sun's up. No, the sun's going down.
I think they talk about all sorts of things. I mean, I think definitely at dawn and dusk, there's quite a bit of announcing that it's dawn or it's dusk, but it does seem like there's just kind of a lot of like, tip, 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 tip,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, they do
it would be nice to know if you could have like an app that translated birdsong into what they were actually saying.
Well, it does. I have many years back, I think back when I was at school, there are studies, however they detected, of these huge variations, because some birds have tremendous vocal capacities. We have
like mockingbirds or myna birds.
Yeah.
Maybe it's mockingbirds. Whatever it is, they have like a ridiculously huge capacity to
I think that is, yes.
emulate.
And of course
imitate.
the parakeet and that. Just for a moment here, I will make an announcement that, because we have 5 minutes, that next week Shannon Hayes will be speaking, and we're going to talk about, again, Pisces, and it'll be about the wild and the nature, animals, ocean. It'll be lots of fun. And so,
yeah, that'll be great.
Yeah.
Shannon's wonderful.
And for the audience, again, tonight you're listening to Paetra Tauchert of California. And look on the website, and in fact, I think your blog, or not your blog, but your website is Paetra Tauchert. But if you need to if you can't remember how to spell that for people, just check on Talk Cosmos, and you can get in touch with her. It does wonderful work. So, if you had something you wanted to say about that too, go ahead, and then we'll wrap up our last thoughts, pulling in these threads.
Check out my show, because it's really a fun way to link astrology and music together. And because it's Pisces time, this would be a natural extension to listen to my shows, because you will listen to Pisces music.
Yes, and it'll be quite a jump for both of us to go into Aries. Aries is such another dimension,
I know, completely. It's like cue the heavy metal hard rock.
Yeah, forward motion. It is so true. I was looking here, well, not just, but the international films, what with the global, or the awards that were just on.
The Oscars?
The Oscars, yes, that it's increasing film, films also with Pisces, and of course music, so it's a total natural energy. And that the whole globe, and of course right now Neptune is in Pisces, and it will continue for the next, I think, 7 years.
It sure is.
Yeah, 2026. I mean, it's really exciting to think, because it rules the feet too, that the boots are just getting more exciting. I saw pictures that were like landscape designs practically on these boots. It's like,
oh my goodness.
The feet, people are, besides the lights on the feet for kids, people are getting really excited. But film, yeah, and it's really another way of, between the music, even though a lot of them might have subtitles, but that music delivers, how to communicate with that foreign film, because more countries are producing more films, and I know the United States films are going all across the globe more, and so it's just this whole new approach of communication.
It sure is. Yeah, I mean, I think you probably could listen to or watch and listen to a movie that didn't have subtitles, that wasn't in your language, and get kind of a sense of what's happening based on the music.
I'm trying to remember. I was living in Mexico, down Mazatlan, when my husband and I first got together, and we went to go see a movie. Oh, I should remember what it was. It was one of these really epic type films, and of course it was all in Spanish, which was fine, and we really got along with it. And it was about Mexico. It was not the Mexico we know, but ancient times. Oh, I wish I could remember. It wasn't Avatar, but it was similar to something like Avatar in the sense it was really a epic show, and it somehow we did get through that whole show feeling like we'd really enjoyed the movie, without understanding.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a basic information. Well, I hope more people participate with music. I think if we did our whole language, we might bridge some of the polarities that we have, and progressively. And we have about a minute and a half, Paetra, just to let you know as we wrap this up. So I appreciate so much you returning and sharing everything about music. It's just been delightful.
It has been. It's been really fun.
Yeah. And I would love to watch your show. So, all right, folks, thank you once again. We love you.
Thanks, Sue. Love you.
Thank you for listening to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Be sure to tune in next Saturday at 6 p.m. to continue finding your roots in the stars.
The preceding audio was via a Skype call.